All right, so this story is thanks to, we're going to have to thank Twitter for this next topic, because what happened was there was a fan that reached out to Rian Johnson, the director of The Last Jedi, and he says that he had some concerns learning about the mass freedom that the directors have had with the films. And this is something that David actually touched on earlier in the show. Yeah. And he's like, hey, what do you mean that you have this whole freedom? There's not an outline for the film. Rian Johnson was very honest on Twitter. He said, yeah, when I walked on, I could do whatever I wanted. They went as far as to say that they have not determined Snoke's reveal. They don't even have Rey's parentage locked in yet. Pablo Hidalgo, who's like the keeper of the Star Wars canon, joined the conversation as well and was like, hey, nothing to be worried about, because that's how the last two trilogies were. I'm going to disagree with that, and I'm going to tell you why in just a second, but let's start with you, Jesse. You see this Twitter conversation. What do you think? Are you concerned about there not really being a structure for this new trilogy?
There's pros and cons to it. Especially, I kind of paid off with Carrie Fisher's death.
I was about to say that.
Because if it was completely written in stone, I mean, just the amount of work needed to to adjust that, to make the adjustments. They have a lot of work ahead of them anyway, from what we've already read and heard.
Pablo Hidalgo did come out on Twitter and say the fact that it's not really officially canon until it hits the movie screen.
Yeah, and I have to kind of agree with you too, Dave, because I do feel like that the prequels and the original trilogy were a little bit more set in stone. They had more of a layout going, and everything.
Well, because Lucas had that, he had the Star Wars story, and then he just took that first chunk and he made that Star Wars that we got in '77.
Especially with the original trilogy, because that first film, what most people don't realize, the reason they chose Episode 4 to be the first film was because if it flopped in the theater, that was it.
Right.
But
then for Empire Strikes Back was the middle chunk, Return of the Jedi was that last chunk, and he didn't have all the details. We know that he didn't know that Luke and Leia were siblings until he got to Empire, but he kind of knew where it was going.
Yeah, it's just, maybe that's what Pablo was trying to suggest, that yes, we have this basic outline, but there's certain things that we're leaving open in case we need to change it.
Nick, does this scare you?
I like it from the aspect of it's impossible to leak something that hasn't been set in stone.
Yeah.
So with there being no set script, there's nothing possible to leak. It's almost impossible to know what's coming, and that's what I really like about it.
Very cool. And I want to make sure that we mention that this story and the one before was thanks to StarWarsNewsNet.com. They are the best aggregator of Star Wars content online, and we definitely want to thank them for their hard work to make it a lot easier for us to find these stories. David, you hear that Rian Johnson had complete freedom. What do you think?
I love it. Let's be honest. Who are the creative people when it comes to making a movie? It's going to be the director. It's going to be the set designers. It's going to be the costume designers. It's not going to be the people sitting in the suits in the room figuring out the budget. So the more we can take the creative control away from the boardroom and give it to the people who are actually creative, I think it's beautiful.
A lot of times, too, it's the music people that determine how the flow of things go, because they have an idea for a score, and they're like, "Okay, someone needs to die here." I mean, that's actually, if you going back to Halo, which is kind of what I'm real familiar with. Sergeant Johnson, one of the main characters, he dies in Halo 3. That was because the person making the music, Marty O'Donnell, was like, "I need a major character to die here." And that's what led to his death. So a lot of times the music people can kind of dictate how things go as well.
Do we know if Williams is going to score the next one?
Yeah, he's actually almost done with it. He actually got the...
How old is that dude?
He's in his late 80s. He's almost about to turn 90. But he got access to the rough edit, I believe, going back to February. But it's interesting because he's actually composing the score. This is a complete tangent, but he's composing the score, and then they're going to put it to the film. Ryan wants to edit to his music, which is the first time they've done with the saga film. Usually it's the finished product, and then Williams just scores to that.
That's kind of what it sounds like the Halo kind of did, make the music and then kind of go from there.
I'm excited just based on that trailer that we've seen already, or that teaser that we've gotten at Celebration. Those last 7 chords at the end of that thing is just daunting. I love it. I think my last thought on this would be that if we don't know Snoke's identity, because that was one of the things that they did mention, we don't know. To me, that gives me hope that maybe that Plagueis theory can come back to the forefront, and if not, maybe at the very least, Snoke could be a Sith, or be tied to that. I want the Sith in this new trilogy.
It's got to come full circle.
It's
got to come full circle.
It really needs. I don't know if it needs to. That's just what I want, and it sounds like that's what we all want.